DCTV.
DCTV.
Hey everybody, and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is my first video. My name is Dustin. I just wanted to welcome everybody and go over my entrepreneurial journey. It's tricky to say that word. Basically, like many of you out there, I was working at regular jobs. I was fortunate enough to, when I was around 25 years old, get an IT internship. I was, prior to that, I was washing cars at Hertz Rental Car, and I had lost that job for speeding tickets. To summarize, I got an opportunity to work at a large onion packaging and processing plant doing IT work. And that was around 2009, and I seized that opportunity. It was supposed to be a temporary job for 3 months. It was actually quite daunting for me as I had no formal IT training. I mean, I had built gaming computers and stuff like that. But ultimately, I never really had done anything. I didn't know what DHCP was. I didn't know what DNS was. I mean, I didn't really know anything beyond I need a good video card and processor to play World of Warcraft or Doom or whatever. Mostly through my personality, from what I'm told now, or in the past, I was able to get the job, and thankfully that job turned permanent through a lot of hard work. I mean, at the time it was just normal to me. I just took it as an opportunity, but I stayed many late nights, learned as much as I could, always asked to do extra. I went to classes. I remember my boss paid for me to go to an exchange class, and that really kind of brought together the basics of like Active Directory and ADSI and attributes and DNS and DHCP and external versus internal DNS, just all the basics of IT, right? I utilized that information to continue to grow in my career. I worked there about 3 years. Then I went off to Goodwill to be an IT manager there and oversee a local Goodwill that had 6 or 7 stores at the time in 2013. It may have been 2012. Anyway, I did a complete renovation of a Goodwill that basically had local databases on their primary register, right? They didn't have servers, they didn't have redundant drives, they didn't have anything like that. Again, I don't want to get too far down the technical hole here for those of you who are not interested in that, but basically totally upgraded their network, point-to-point fiber connections, the whole works, redundant drives, redundant servers, equal logic SANs, storage networks, all that stuff. From there, I went to a apple packing plant, which is a very brief stay because I got a much better offer to work at a hay exporter. And to be honest, I really want to focus on this a little bit because I know many of you out there think if you just make enough money, you can put up with any job. And to some degree, that is true if you're struggling. But in my case, I went from around $65,000 a year to $90,000, and I was miserable. I mean, wasn't that the people were bad. It wasn't anything like that. It was just a very long commute. It's about an hour each way. They were kind of technically averse in some ways. They didn't want a lot of drastic change. I had made a scale app that integrated with Navision where we would automatically receive the hay inventory and create purchase orders or sales order based on if it was outgoing or ingoing and all this other stuff. No problems with any of that. But basically, after that, they were kind of timid and kind of put me on the back burner, so to speak. And so with that, I really wasn't accomplishing anything. I would come into work, at like 10:30, 11, and I would watch Twitch TV and frankly waste time looking back. I had not had any kids yet. For point of reference, I have my 6th kid on the way here in December. We had my daughter in November of 2016, and I got a call shortly thereafter from a former coworker at Goodwill that was working for a large fertilizer manufacturer, and he offered me the ability to do some IT potentially for this fertilizer manufacturer. They had someone they were outsourcing to. I had mentioned wanting to start a business in the past, but like many of you out there, I was just fearful, trepidatious, whatever word you want to use. And so ultimately, I never really pursued that, but by the grace of God, in my lap falls this fairly large client, and I met the owner named Peter. It went awesome. He hired me. I could go into a lot of intricate stories about certain things. I will say that they had a company of around, I believe there were 10 staff managing their IT at the time, and I was like, maybe I'm not cut out for this. I don't know if I could do this. They have a lot of staff. And there were some things that happened during the migration, or transition, I guess, to my services, where I realized, these people actually don't know that much. And it gave me a lot of confidence. It really was a good confidence boost. But again, to summarize, I tried to juggle both for about 3 or 4 months, which again, I was getting at the time, I think $3,600 a month for this new client on top of my $90,000 salary. So I was doing pretty well, as you can imagine. I mean, especially this is pre-COVID, pre-massive inflation. So I think 3 or 4 months into that, the controller, who was a good friend of mine, called me in, and he said, you know, hey, they want you here earlier. And again, I was pretty tired because I was jumbling both jobs. I was not hyper motivated to show up early when there wasn't a lot to do. And to be quite frank, I am a night owl. You'll notice I'm recording this at night with extra lighting. And it's not that I didn't want to be productive. I just felt like it was just this minor nuance. And there was nothing unreasonable about it. But I had, like I said, basically been accomplishing nothing. And I asked him, I said, well, are they unhappy with my work or what's going on? And he just told me, no, they love you. They love your work. They just want you here earlier. And so I kind of took this as the opportunity to pause, and I'd already been thinking about it. I said, I totally understand, but I think I'm going to put in my notice. I've already got this client. I'm going to pursue this and start an IT managed services company. I would love to transition you guys to being a client, you know, for perhaps a third of my salary or something like that, but I totally understand if that's not viable. And again, by the grace of God, they were very kind. They decided to sign up and get onto a monthly service agreement. I don't do contracts. So if people want to cancel, I think that is the right way to do business. I think you should be performing up to a certain standard. If people feel like they want to cancel, you don't want to have them, in my opinion, wrangled into any contract. So anyways, again, major blessing, right? I'm out on my own. I've got 2 significant contracts, you know, paying $3,000 and $3,600 a month at the time. And I kind of hit a lull because, again, like I think many people deal with, I just couldn't wrap my head around really marketing and all these other things. And there was a lot of fear, right? Like when you first enter sales, especially with no formal training, I just feel like you have a certain level of trepidation. And so I joined Rotary. I went to a few different chambers here locally. I thought about joining BNI. I never did that. I did go to Rotary quite a bit, and I made some friends there. And I think, yeah, I did get one long-term client, a lawyer, out of there. And ultimately, I'm not going to pretend that I had some major innovation to the sales process. I just provide a good service and continue to get referrals. And, you know, that company has gone from, you know, 2016 of doing, you know, maybe 80,000 in revenue to now, I mean, I'm on track for, I'd have to look at my P&L to give you an exact number, but around 600 some odd thousand in revenue. And it's just me. I don't have employees in that company. I do contract out a very minimal amount of work for certain things like camera installations, but ultimately I don't have any employees in that company. And so to rewind a little bit, I got this idea in around 2017 for a donation pickup app because our local Goodwill had stopped doing donation pickups. And I knew that was a super popular service. I knew from my time as an executive at the Goodwill here that, you know, I had traveled to other Goodwills in Portland, Arizona, Phoenix to be precise, Tacoma. Again, and for those of you who don't know, Goodwills are regionally based, so they're all different, right? So some are ran amazingly, some are ran very poorly. They all have different CEOs, different everything. And then above that is Goodwill Industries International, which is more like a franchise sort of operation where Goodwills pay a royalty. But anyway, to summarize, they stopped doing pickups. I got this idea for this awesome app. I'm like, we should make an app to do pickups. At the time, there was no really great way to do pickups. I mean, again, Uber had just become a thing. I sort of had this vision for an Uber type app, which of course our app never became remotely that big. But that being said, I consulted with PeerBits at the time. I think it was like 10 grand to get this app made. Very basic sort of development, right? Where they could go on their, you know, Play Store or Apple Store and download the app, right? Put in their info, be put in our database. And so there was really 2 components, which is the phone app, right? And then we had a Google hosted, you know, VM with the MySQL database and everything else. And so this was a great way to both track our donors and make it convenient for them to schedule, right? To make it frictionless, hopefully. But ultimately, a lot of people still called. I think there's a great lesson here, which I should do a separate video about, but custom apps are actually kind of difficult, especially, you know, pre-AI, where you're trying to go through this language barrier with someone and make an affordable app. It's certainly not as easy as it could be. But again, to summarize, that was kind of where we were at. I, at the time, only had really the 2 clients. At the time, I think we were probably, you know, grossing around 90,000, you know, pre-tax. A large reason why I took the leap is because we had just had our daughter in November, you know, when my former boss consulted with me and said, hey, I needed to come in more. And I just realized if I didn't take that leap, for those of you out there, you know, I just thought if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it. You know, that's just what happens, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just you get wrangled into, oh, I've got 3 kids to support. I've got 2 kids to support. I can't take this risk right now. And it's just very hard. I'm not, making a judgment call either direction on this. It just becomes exponentially harder the more people that are relying on you, right? And the more costs you have to take a risk. So that was another catalyst for me kind of making that decision. But back to the main point, I still had a lot of apprehension and fear. It's funny, Dave Ramsey always says, the only ship that never sails is a partnership. And that's 100% true. And I think a great lesson for everybody out there listening to this is just, you're not that unique. Like, we're very unique. We're all made in God's image in our own way, but you're not that unique. Like, the fears you have, the anxieties, the things you have, the doubts, and many of even the ideas, the positive things are not typically unique just to you. And so with that being said, I tried to take on a partner who owned like a successful courier taxi service in a neighboring town. And we really hit it off at first, but there's a ton of sort of different lessons here. But our lives weren't really congruent with one another, even though we were very friendly with each other. And ultimately, the partnership that we established was that we would split the cost 70-30, because he wanted to be a minority owner. And I was happier with that anyway, because I didn't want to not have majority control of something I was paying the majority for, and ultimately it was my idea. And so we kind of divvied it up that I would finish the app, I would pay for that, he would find a box van, he was kind of mechanically inclined, he would fix it up, and we would start this pickup service. Well, the app was done. I had tested it extensively, I had done all these different things, and it was functional, it was good. I'll touch more on that here in a bit, but he had done nothing besides find a box van for $1,000. He did not fix it up. It did not run. He didn't do anything besides like put carpet on the floorboards. Come to find out, when I'm calling him, I'm starting to nag him like, hey, we got to get this going. What are we doing? He didn't even have a title for the vehicle. And finally, that took months to get figured out. I mean, the whole thing was just kind of a mess. Obviously, I'm getting frustrated. I don't feel like he's taking it serious. And I'm also thinking, well, this isn't even the plurality of the work. Like, once we're doing pickups, once we have inventory to store and manage and everything else, we've got to, sort it all out. We got to pick it up. We're going to, eventually get a store, which is even more work, right? So I basically called him up and said, hey, I'm really sorry. I don't think this is working. I'd like to buy the box van. We'll fix it up. We'll do it. And he's like, well, I got it running. And I'm like, okay, well, that's great, but I still just don't think this is a healthy relationship. I think it's better to just be emotionally honest with ourselves right now. And so ultimately, before we had ever done a single pickup or ever done anything or even knew where this business was going, I cut him a check for the $3,000 he had invested, plus another, I think $2,500. So he almost doubled his money. Went and got this box van. It's funny. I do think there was a divine blessing here, because a buddy drove it back for me. We went up there. It's about an hour away. A buddy gets in the van, drives it back, and right as he's pulling in, it dies. And so I call my Uncle Wayne, who's super mechanical, and I'm like, hey, I got this box van. It's got it had this old Marina logo on the side, all kinds of stuff. So anyway, I'm like, we got to get it painted. We got to get it reliable. The AC doesn't work. We don't need that. We just need it to reliably drive. We can live with rolling the windows down. So I take it over there, put another, I think, $1,000 into it for a fuel pump and all this other stuff. I literally took orbital sanders and just sanded down the sides with a friend's help, and then painted the whole thing as best I could. It wasn't great, but at least it was decent looking, right? And at the time I had this motive that I was going to wrap it, which, I don't know, for those of you who don't know, wraps are fairly expensive. And at the end of the day, I just decided it wasn't worth it, because again, this van, I think in total was worth $2,000 at the time, even with the work and money we'd put into it. So I was like, no, never mind. We're not going to do that. It's good enough painted. We're done. At this point, I still have some apprehension. I still have self-doubt. We're ready to go though. So my wife, she really was the catalyst to kind of getting this off the ground. She went out, started handing out flyers for a free pickup service that we had printed off Vistaprint. People were very kind and very giving. They really liked the idea of a pickup service on top of giving back. Our idea for our store is called Community Thrift. Has always been to give back to the community, to keep things community oriented. Creating jobs is what every business does. We'll just make that as a succinct point, I guess. So, it's very easy to throw everything under that umbrella. A little tidbit of wisdom: you don't want to have partnerships, guys. Unfortunately, that soured that friendship. You don't want to have partnerships. I mean, I thought I was pretty gracious in the way I handled it, given we've only spent money, we hadn't made a penny. There was no guarantee that any of this would work. And it's very hard, because if you're going to have a partner, and if you're going to be a partner, almost like a marriage, you have to be emotionally honest very emotionally honest. You have to be able to be very transparent and very honest about your faults and what you're going to do and what you're not going to do, you know? So if you're one of those people who has like vehicles stacked up in your backyard and one day you're going to work on them, you're probably not meant to be a business partner, just as an easy example, because you're not being emotionally honest with yourself, because most of you never work on those vehicles, right? So you have to be honest about, am I really going to do this? Do I really have the time to do this, right? Because we all have limited time. But anyways, back to our first donation pickup. My wife went down the street. At the time, we were very, very cautious about, saying no to anything, of course, because we had not picked up anything. And so she handed him a flyer and explained, sort of our vision for community thrift and wanting to do local community projects and support local nonprofits that don't get as much attention, that don't have stores. They said yes. They said go for it. And it was actually really kind of funny, because we went down there, and it was like 3 or 4 box truck loads, but we also were very inefficient in the way we did things then, because there was many learnings. We took, I think, 3 mattresses, which we would never do today. Again, your first pickup, you can't, those mattresses cost like $10 to dispose of. You can't pick and choose. But the great thing is these folks continued to refer us to others. My wife continued to go around every weekend. I would do my IT career and support my clients during the week, and then on the weekend, I remember I set up a Skype for Business number, or Microsoft Teams, whichever. It's hard to remember when the transition happened, but I'd be sitting there with our 2 kids, basically, well, 1 kid and then 2 kids, which was a transitionary period. But anyway, because we had our son in 2018. So I'm sitting there watching the kids, trying to answer the phone, trying to professionally schedule people to do these pickups, right? And then she would come home from yard sailing, and then I would go out, do all the pickups as much as I could. And then people are still calling, and I'm like trying to answer while driving this old box van, and I've got a friend helping me that I'm just paying part-time. It was quite the adventure. And so I really didn't realize how quickly the pickup thing would grow. The app really gave us a lot of validity. And so with that validity, we just continued to grow and acquire a ton of donations. It was just a complete blessing. Something I didn't mention is that throughout this process, basically after the first couple of weekends, we had decided we're not going to be able to store all this stuff. We had started looking for storage facilities. At first I was very naive. I thought, we'll just get a mini storage, that'll work. They had some with air conditioning, which seemed like a nice amenity at the time. But ultimately, your standard 10 by 10, 10 by 12, whatever storage unit with maybe 10-foot high ceilings, there's no way. You would fill that up extremely fast, right? I don't know what I was thinking. I continued to scour for a good alternative, right? And we didn't want to spend a ton of our capital on storage, right? Because we're trying to save money to start a store and get this business off the ground. And so we found this awesome storage unit facility that we could get 600 square feet for basically $250 a month. And if we paid 6 months in advance, it was $200 a month. And so we did that. It was awesome because again, you could fit 4 Gaylords across, and then you technically could go 4 high. But at this time, we didn't have a forklift. We didn't have any fancy equipment. We didn't have a pallet jack. We leased that facility. And basically, Toys R Us was going out of business around the same time. I don't remember the exact timeline, but I bought some pallet racking, which was a good deal, but for the type of storage we do, the pallet racking was kind of unnecessary. We did end up utilizing it for like larger items and like kids' sandbox and play toys and playhouses and I don't know, sort of those random big items. But ultimately, with Gaylords, you can stack them just on top of each other. And so as we continue to grow, we leased the next door unit. And so we leased the next door unit, and with that unit, basically what we did is it was a little bit smaller, but we put 4 Gaylords across, and we just manually filled them up by their department, right? So like electrical, housewares, textiles, books, etc. And then from there, we just stacked a pallet and a Gaylord on top and used a ladder to get up and continue. That way we could double our storage space, basically. In full transparency, we thought about going 3 high, but just it gets rather dangerous after, being about 10 feet high, and it's also kind of slow and arduous, right? Like you're climbing up this ladder carrying, I don't know, an air fryer or a toaster oven or, a big piece of art and anything you would see in a standard thrift store, right? And like when you're carrying it all the way up a ladder to put in a box, like 4, 5, 6 feet off the ground is about as high as you really want to go, because even if you're not worried about a safety incident, again, it's just super slow. And so basically we filled up this entire unit. I don't remember the exact amount of Gaylords. It was probably around 100. And at this point I'm like, well, we need to, there were no other units available. We obviously did not want to procure some other storage facility. And so at this point we got a forklift, and we got it off Craigslist for like $7,600. And I had kind of vacillated back and forth on it, but it was awesome. It worked for years with no issues. It was great. It was a pneumatic, because we had pneumatic, for those of you who don't know, is large sort of off-road tires instead of like warehouse tires, so you don't get stuck in the gravel. And anyway, I of course got it stuck the very first time I drove it, but never again after that. But that being said, we use that to restack everything, where we could stack 3 and 4 high depending on where the trusses were in this storage unit. And that freed up, about 50% of the space, of course. And so then we continued to accrue inventory. And I don't remember the exact number of storage units we had, but we had a lot. And so, I think it was 3 or 4 by the time we even got to the point of getting a storefront, which I'll get to here shortly. During this time, I'm going to Rotary, I'm going to other groups, I'm going to chamber events. I'm, also providing great service for my current clients, and, church friends, other people are referring me as they can, just out of the kindness of their hearts, which is awesome. And so I'm accruing new clients, like I got a large machine shop, I got a lawyer's office, a physical therapist, agricultural packing plant, just tons of different industries coming together. I had never lost a client. And so that, of course, helped us to continue to save money and increase our revenue. At some point, we bought a 2014 F254 with like 40,000 miles for $21,900. I remember this price because with COVID, the truck is still worth more than that, even though it has like 100,000 miles now, which is just crazy to me. And we also bought a 8.5 foot by 24 foot long trailer that we had wrapped, which hopefully, again, we can cut into a picture here. So this 8.5 by 24 foot trailer and the truck kind of served as a dual purpose. They were a backup to the box van that wasn't hyper reliable. Obviously, it's not the easiest thing to drive around in comparison to a box van, but it can hold a lot more inventory. And the future goal here was that it was going to be our mobile donation trailer. And so as you can see in the wrap, it's for mobile donation drop-off. So like what we do today is, if it's a high school senior party, they go attend it somewhere, they have it placed, and then they get a certain amount of money per pound, and then they get a bonus if they exceed like 3,000 pounds. That's become a super popular thing we do as well, because local nonprofits can utilize that to get rid of excess inventory or whatever, or donations they have, and then get some money for it. High school seniors can do it as like a team building event while also generating money. It typically makes much more than a car wash, for instance. I think like a local high school here made like almost $960 last time for 2 days, where they just took shifts. They did like 6 hours a day. Funny enough, the local habitat was struggling, which isn't funny in and of itself, but they used to have a large office space, and then they also had their store down in the same sort of strip mall. Well, they decided to consolidate their office to their store to save money. And this office, even though it wasn't huge, it was around 4,200 square feet, 4,172, I think, to be precise. And so we ended up basically taking the leap and leasing the space, which, at the time, to kind of convey my emotion here, guys, like this was scary for me. And we approached the landlord and basically worked out terms to pay like $4,523 a month. We got 3 months free up front, and they paid, I think, 70% of the renovation cost. And with that, we also opted to do the demolition ourselves to save money, which we'll cut in some pictures of. But as you can see, it's all office. And so we cut out all the walls, we threw everything away, we did as much as we could, and then construction commenced. And that took way longer than we had hoped. It actually bled, I think, a month and a half into our free months. So, 3 free months of rent, and we ended up paying a month and a half before we ever even could consider getting open. And so, it was a very frustrating experience, on top of the fact that, again, I was sweating bullets, right? This is the IT business, I could always go back to work when I bailed out to start that. And I had clients already lined up that were fairly comparable to my salary in some ways, right? And I had a lot more autonomy and freedom doing that. So it wasn't as much friction internally, but really signing the lease for the store and knowing about these upfront sort of construction costs, out of pocket, $30,000 to $40,000 that I would have to pay myself on top of what the landlord was paying. That was nerve-wracking. There's a personal guarantee on every lease you sign, and it's not like if it doesn't work out, you can just walk away. And on top of that, we had to sign a 5-year lease to get those free months and get the landlord to commit to 70% of the tenant improvement costs. At the time, very daunting for us, but we went ahead and we did it, obviously. And so, throughout this process of waiting for construction, we procured another forklift, which another sort of divine intervention there is just, I had never even known what a forklift rotator was. And, call me stupid because I didn't do any research. I never thought we need one, but, I found this green old 1987 Clark forklift on I think it was Marketplace, Facebook Marketplace. And it was like $3,500. And so I'm like, well, let's go look at it. And I took my uncle and he checked it all out and he's like, it's awesome. Plus it has a rotator. And I'm like, well, okay, that's great. And he's like, you should definitely get it. So I got it. We bring it back. I don't even think much much about this rotator, right? I'm just wanting construction to be done. I'm wanting everything to be ready so we can start putting fixtures in, start setting up the store. Anyway, we'll get to why the rotator is important here in a bit, but we start setting up this store. We've got, H racks, wall standards, all this stuff. And there's tons of learnings, right? Because I don't even think we have technically the right wall standard in our first store, but somehow we made it work with these shelves. And again, just the spacing, it's down to like the millimeter to get these things up on the wall, which I know is simplistic, but when you're stressed and it's your first time doing it and you're trying to save money, there were definitely a lot of learnings and mistakes. And so, we got everything set up and kind of laid out. And again, I kind of had to map it all out to make it all fit and still be ADA compliant and all these other various facets of business. Just to give you guys context here, when you factor in the flatbed trailer, the 24-foot cargo trailer, the F-250, the 2 forklifts, the leasehold improvements, the upfront first and last month's rent, and then another, I think around $30,000 to $40,000 just in store fixtures and shelving and computers and a server and everything, security cameras, which we ran all the wire for to save money again, right? Because I'm also in that industry. And obviously I set up my own SQL database. We made a custom barcoding solution to track our inventory and our average price per item. And that way we could use iPads and price on the go. We use, ZPL language with Zebra printers. I'll probably go into more detail on that later. But just all these various things, right, cost a lot of money. I think all in to get open and get this store going, we were between $150,000 and $160,000 just out of our own pockets. And so as you can imagine, I'm pretty stressed. We've got volunteers and friends helping us and some, paid employees. I did hire some of my friends who I'm immensely grateful for, but working with friends, I will just say out loud, is very, very hard in other ways, right? Because just when you're the boss and there's a different perspective, again, it's kind of like a partnership. It can be very difficult, just words to the wise. There's a reason every single book talks about this, and you're not immune to that either. And I think we all in our own heads want to believe it can be different for us, but really there's just a way we work as a species, and I don't think you're going to be able to make that work any better than the countless other examples out there, but it's not impossible if you want to try, I guess. During this process, we're like wanting to tag clothing. We're wanting to do everything kind of in a way like Goodwill because they are kind of the leader in this area. And at a certain point, I just realized I don't have enough experience with clothing. And I had heard about unit pricing through another friend who had worked at Goodwill in years prior. And we ended up transitioning to a unit pricing model for a lot of our inventory. And at first we started off unit pricing like almost everything besides housewares. Looking back, that clearly was a mistake because we pretty much transitioned away from unit pricing for everything except for clothing. And even with clothing, we will still individually price higher end stuff like Patagonia or Buckle Jeans, right? Rock Revival, whatever. And so at the time though, the reason I kind of freaked and changed my mind and ran towards that is because I really didn't have a respect for training and just the level of training that Goodwill has to do for their pricers and for others, right? I mean, you see these videos all over the place about how, this thrift store priced this so dumb, or they priced this so low or way too high or whatever. And guys, it's very hard. Like, you're pricing hundreds of thousands of items in any given year, all from different airs, brands, qualities. I mean, everything. It's not like we're just, AI that can auto price stuff for you. And even AI now, which did not exist back when we were doing this, gets a lot of stuff wrong. So again, to summarize, we moved towards unit pricing because I would find a pair of, Nikes on the shelf for $49.99, and then I'd find another one for $2.99. And it was like that inconsistency I just felt was going to kill us from the get-go. So we moved to unit pricing, and that way it was like set like adult men's were like $6.99, adult women's were $5.99, something like that. I don't remember the exact prices. I think all DVDs were like $2.99. Again, all t-shirts were like $3.29. All women's blouses were $3.99. Jeans were $5.99, just stuff like that. Again, just set prices, right? In another video, I'll probably get more into the learnings of that, but we've recoiled from that, and it is what it is. But, fast forward, we have our grand opening. I'm like sweating bullets. Basically the night before, I am up until like 2 a.m. pricing items, cleaning up everything, right? We've hired our first few employees, of which barely anyone showed up. A lot of it was just word of mouth. We would post jobs on our time clock software home base, and we would post them on Facebook. And we had at one point 10 interviews scheduled, and only one girl showed up. She was our first hire, and it was just so funny because, she really wanted the job, and she didn't even know that we had like no other options, but we didn't. And so of course we hired her, and she was there for about a year, but she was very young, and I was a very new leader, and probably didn't do a lot of things great either. So that didn't work out long term, but we were very thankful to have her in the time we did. I'm up until 2 a.m., right? Getting prepped, making sure everything's ready. At that point, I'm like, okay, we're ready to open. So April 19th is when we opened. I basically went home at this, 2 a.m., made a Facebook post. And again, I was very broke. We were down to like $500. I boost this post, for like $50, which was so stupid. I mean, I should have spent more. It would have been better to spend more, right? Broader reach would have helped, but it is what it is. I did what I did. By the grace of God, again, we had a massive line right at 9 a.m. And, we way underpriced a ton of stuff. We did $4,700 the first day, and then we did like $2,700 the second day. And then we kind of ended up averaging around $1,000 a day. And there's many lessons I could talk about with, we were definitely not pricing enough items. Like, you have a massive quantity of items when you open, but you have to constantly be pricing to replace those items. So anyway, we're profitable from day one, albeit not a high profit. Typically we would make anywhere from $1,000 to $4,000 a month, which, of course, that's like good, but when you're $160,000 into this endeavor, you're looking at a long period of time, for any sort of return on investment, right? But I stayed true to the course. I was working 16 hours a day, and we just kept going. And anyways, fast forward to 2020, and COVID is happening, right? And so February, March is like totally dead. Like, people are scared. Even we're considering, masking, all this stuff before it was mandated or anything like that. And so we shut down early, and we had to lay everyone off for a period of time, of course. And the original, I think, reopening date was May 5th. And so we reopened on May 5th because we sold lots of essential items. There was some contention at the time about that, but ultimately we made what I think was a great decision, and I will never be, my mind will not be changed on that. And so, yeah, I mean, we had some voices, some of my friends that still work for me, some employees, they were willing to come back. I called all of them, and they all wanted to come back. They were all ready to work. They all felt safe going to work. We provided them with hand sanitizer, masks, shields, all that stuff. And the only point of contention was, we don't think customers will come. But all the customers came. We had tons of customers every single day. I mean, we went from doing, $1,000 a day to $3,000 a day. We had lines of donors because there weren't a lot of other options. And it really, as bad as COVID was, in a way for us, it was a blessing because it put us on the map. At the other end of the strip mall, a sign company went out of business. We were given the opportunity to lease that space because we had been accepting donations in a super small area, super small. I mean, 400 and some odd square feet where we priced and put donations. And I mean, every day we'd have to forklift stuff in and out, and it was just a total mess. And so again, I don't want to get too into the nuance here, but this production space was a major blessing, allowed us to produce more, accept more stuff. The only challenge, of course, was we moved our donation door. With that, we have to retrain all the donors where to go. And, from there, it just continued to grow. So in 2022, I started a junk removal company because we were getting all these calls about, hey, can you take my old stained mattress or this furniture or that? Ultimately, that was just a way to self-refer for items that Habitat wouldn't take or we wouldn't take, that we could then, if they wanted to, we could charge a fee and pick up those items. Well, that kind of grew in ways I didn't expect. I mean, we did some really cool hoarder house cleanouts. This is quite possibly the craziest job we've ever encountered, so check this out. So as you can see, this is quite the hoarder house. Going to be a little gross to clean out, but that's part of the job. It became a six-figure business fairly quickly through Google ads and Facebook ads, but there's a lot more cost to junk removal than people are aware of, which again, we'll cover in many other videos, I'm sure. But ultimately, we have some great jobs. We have some very lucrative contracts with like Costco and Hayden Homes and other large entities. That's awesome, and we really appreciate that stuff. But it's just, it is a much more costly business than people think, especially in Washington with the cost of gas and everything else and just all the insurance requirements and stuff. And so I wanted to mention it because it is a successful business, and it does do around probably $250,000 a year in revenue now. And so that was something I started just a few years ago. And then a bigger thing that we kind of got going is we found a piece of property, and I had always been scouring for a location for a second store, right? Because the dream was always to grow the thrift stores to something bigger, right? I'm living off the IT money. I'm reinvesting every penny into the stores, including my own IT money and other money, through keeping our cost of living low and not carrying debts on like vehicles and other things and having credit card debt or anything like that. We were able to, again, save quite a bit of money, especially through COVID when we saw that boom in sales and growth. So we find this store And it's great. It's got 2 tenants. It's got a tanning salon and the National Guard, which obviously helped pay the loan. We did a SBA 504 on it, which requires 10% down, which really helped with our cash flow because, again, we don't have, I mean, for those of you who are unaware, to get a conventional loan on like a commercial building, you're looking at like 30 to 40% down. So this building was 2.3 million. So just, again, even though we were doing well, I didn't have $700,000 in the bank. It just wasn't tenable. And it's not that we were spending a lot. It's just that's a lot of money. We did the SBA 504 process. There were some hiccups with that, but ultimately it went super smooth, primarily because, again, pretty high income versus, right, debt load. So we got that through. We purchased the building. We began renovations on that, and we actually opened January 1st of this year, which, again, that was just the down payment alone, the 10% with all the SBA fees and other closing costs and stuff. I mean, it was like $290,000, maybe more like $275. But anyway, and then you also have all the fixtures, cameras, right? At this store, we have like 32 cameras, all 4K. We ran all the wires. Again, we had to have more forklifts, more other equipment, right? More printers, more iPads, more servers, everything, right? Tons of HVACs, tons of shelving. And so it was a lot of money to get open. Now we're actually looking at buying another store that will be our largest store ever. It'll be 10,500 square feet. And we are doing another SBA loan, primarily because we just opened the other store, 9 months and 9 days ago. And so even though that store, again, has been profitable since day one, this, between all 3 businesses, right? The junk removal, the thrift stores, and my IT business, which is now, over $500,000 a year in revenue. And again, not a lot of cost there outside of like software to support people. I don't have employees or major overhead. Insurance is extremely cheap, like $100 a month for, E&O and all that stuff, general liability. Taking all that money and reinvesting it, and to get this new store, which I think will do amazing. Nothing is guaranteed, right? So far I've been very blessed. My family's been very blessed. And, now we're at 36 employees. Soon we'll have over 50 employees with the new store. That's why I want to start this YouTube channel. I wanted to kind of give you a chronology of how I started and the insecurities with starting and just where I'm at now. And it's not that I don't have insecurities. I'm insecure about being on camera right now. I'm insecure about this next store with the way the world is and just everything going on. I'm just trying to live the best life I can, and I think many of us want to do that, and I appreciate all of you that took the time to watch me ramble on here, and I hope that you'll like and subscribe to these videos. I hope to make this channel about growth and learning and business. And, it's not that there isn't tons of other content like that out there, but I just feel there's not a lot of content on YouTube, at least that I've seen, and maybe the algorithm just hasn't shown it to me, but that really highlights traditional business growth, right? Like, this is not an overnight riches story. This is a lot of work, a lot of patience, ultimately a lot of small decisions amounting to some great things. We're closing on the new store here, and they're moving out. And so we'll probably do some walkthroughs on that as well as, beginning and after photos, everything. So please like and subscribe. Thanks for joining me.